Mr. Walsh, would you be so kind to lead us in the flag salute? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to read the Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News, and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Nutlin, would you read the mission statement for us?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. I would like to now open the meeting to the public, reorganization session items only. Seeing none, I will move to the Board Secretary's report on election results. I will now enter into the record the annual school election results for Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Official board candidate results, 3 full-year terms. Mary Catherine Norian, 2,638. Jessica Moran, 2,227. Gregory Derian, 32. I would now like to administer the oath as the board secretary to the following newly elected board members. Mrs. Mary Catherine Norian, 3 years. Mrs. Jessica Moran, 3 years. Mr. Greg Derian, 3 years. Would you please stand and come forward to be sworn in? Is the mic on?
It's on. Can you hear me? Hello?
We ready?
How's that?
Okay. Required oaths for school board members pursuant to NJSA 18A:12-2.1 and NJSA 41:1:1 and 1-3. I will now begin. Please raise your right hand. Yep. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I
State your name.
Mary
State-
Catherine Norian.
Gregory Darian.
Jessica Moran.
do solemnly swear
That I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God.
I state your name, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of a Board of Education, and that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19:4-1, nor disqualified due to a conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJSA 18A:12-1, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
I, Mary Catherine Norian, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of a Board of Education, and that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19:4-1, nor disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJS 18A:12-1, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my abilities, so help me God.
As trustees of the Oradell Board of Education, please take your seats. Thank you. And congratulations.
It's over.
I will now take a roll call of the Board of Education. Mr. Del Greco.
Here.
Mrs. Downey.
Here.
Mrs. Moran.
Here.
Mrs. Norian.
Here.
Mr. Nutland.
Here.
Mrs. Walker will not be joining us this evening. Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Darien.
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here.
I would now like to open the floor to nominations for President of the Oradell Board of Education. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to nominate Ms. Watson-Nichols as board president.
I'll second the motion.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll close the nominations and now go on the roll. Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darien.
Yes.
Mrs. Watson-Nichols.
Yes.
I would like to congratulate Mrs. Dorothy Watson-Nichols as the President of the Oradell Board of Education, and at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Mrs. Watson-Nichols.
She gets all the wood.
Thank you. Let's open the floor for nominations for Vice President. Mr. Walsh?
I'd like to nominate Greg Durian for Vice President.
Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Ms. Catherine Noreen.
Any other nominations? Okay, we'll close the nomination. The way we're going to do it is in order of nominations. Is how it goes. Do you have pieces of paper, or we're just going to do it in public?
We could do it in public.
Okay,
Do we
so we have to vote first on Mr. Darien. It goes in order of nomination. So you go through the roll call, and everyone has to, it's for Mr. Darien only. So
Yep.
the vote is yes or no.
Okay.
And then the issue is we don't have an odd number, so if it gets split, we're going to have to call our attorney.
Okay.
I think, point of order, I think it actually goes to the county superintendent. I think that's what was done in the past.
Okay, well, yeah,
But
whatever it is, we'll
whatever
find
it
out,
is.
yeah.
Okay. On the roll for Mr. Darien as Vice President of the Oradell Board of Education, Mr. Del Greco.
No.
Mrs. Downey.
No.
Mrs. Moran.
No.
Mrs. Norian.
No.
Mr. Nutland.
No.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darien.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes.
On the roll for Mrs. Catherine Norian as Vice President of the Oradell Board of Education, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
No.
Mr. Darian,
No.
Mrs. Nichols.
No.
The votes are 5 for Mrs. Norian as Vice President of the Oradell Board of Education, and 3 for Mr. Darian. So at this point, I would like to acknowledge Mrs. Catherine Norian as the Vice President of the Oradell Board of Education.
All right, you want to switch seats?
Switch places.
Okay, moving forward, we have the Code of Ethics. I would like to do this as a separate motion, so we'll do it as we normally do it. We will start, I think we have 8 people. 10, so we'll just start with Mr. Nutlin, go this way, and then we'll go around twice. So, Mr. Nutlin, you want to start reading the first one, and we'll come this way?
Code of Ethics. Number 6, yeah. Okay. It is hereby moved that the board adopts the following Code of Ethics developed by the New Jersey Boards Association as the code to which each Oradell board member subscribes. Keep going.
Yeah, read the first
Okay.
one.
I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures.
I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing.
I will confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them.
I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well-run.
I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board.
I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends.
I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and, in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its schools.
I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Why don't you just take the last one also?
I will support and protect school personnel in proper performance of their duties. I will refer all complaints to the Chief School Administrative Officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution.
Okay, I'm going to call this one separate. I don't see lines under it, but we're going to call it separate. Would someone like to make a motion for the Code of Ethics?
I'll go ahead and make the motion if nobody else will.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Nutlin. Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco,
Yes.
Mrs. Downey,
Yes.
Mrs. Moran,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian,
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, it's up to the board if someone would like to make a motion for consent agenda, or we can go one by one.
I make a motion that we have a consent agenda.
Okay, motion by
I'll
Mr.
second it.
Darian for consent agenda. Second by Mr. Walsh. Does anyone have any questions on this consent agenda? This is just the reorg items. Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker, not here, she is absent. Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, moving into our public session, we're going to call the roll call, but if Mr. Iapelli, you could put Mrs. Norian and me in the places where we're supposed to be,
Okay.
and then we'll do a roll call.
Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
No, I'm leaving. I have to go.
Oh, that's right, you have to go.
So I won't be here.
Planning board. That's why we moved on already.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker is absent. Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, Mr. Darian, before you leave, do you have the code of ethics that you could sign for me, for us, before you leave?
Might have handed them in already.
I already have it.
Oh, you already have it? Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
I
this
already
is your oath? Okay, thank you. Okay, open to the public for agenda items only. Okay, not seeing any, we'll move to the superintendent's report. Ms. Bozios?
Good evening. As we start a new year, many of our classes spent time reestablishing classroom behavioral expectations and setting goals, whether individual student goals or classroom goals. At our next board meeting, I will provide an update on the district's goals for this year. However, there are additional projects that are also being worked on outside the scope of our actual goals. In the area of buildings and grounds, over the break, all bathrooms on the second floor were painted and had new mirrors installed. Additionally, the bathrooms in the sixth grade wing also had new lights installed. We have begun the bidding process for summer HVAC work. In the area of public relations, we continue to work on our new website design, which is slated to be launched this winter. We are also working on a winter newsletter to be sent out before the end of the month. This newsletter is one way we encourage families to register for kindergarten. Currently, registration has been open for almost a month, and we have 40 students registered, which is a little low for this time of year. We do encourage families to register early, as it allows us to have an understanding of resource and staffing needs as we work on the budget. In the area of curriculum, we do have a professional day scheduled for January 20th, where teachers will continue to look at data to inform teaching practice. This data can include Dibbles, Foundations, Linkit, our new digital platforms, Happy Numbers, Legends of Learning, and classroom data collection. In the area of personnel, on tonight's agenda, you will find the retirement notification for Mrs. Patricia Cuddy. Mrs. Cuddy has worked in the district for 20 years. We thank her for her dedication to the children of Oradell and wish her well on her next steps. We will post for the April 1st opening for that position tomorrow. Finally, as it is School Board Appreciation Month, I would be remiss not to say thank you to each of you for your commitment to the district. I know that many believe that being a board member just means sitting through 2 meetings a month. However, there is so much more behind the scenes that requires your time and attention. So on behalf of the staff and administration, thank you for your volunteerism and your efforts to make the Oradell Public School District the best it can be. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Iapelli?
Yes, I'd like to report that the audit is fully completed, and at the next board meeting on the 22nd, Mr. Bliss of Lurch, Vinci and Bliss, our auditing firm, will present the audit. And that concludes my report for this evening.
It's early this year. That's good.
Hold on. Just gonna write something here. Okay, moving forward to minutes, we have the review of December 11th. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Iapelli. And we have approval of November 20th. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the November 20th minutes.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Nutlin. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes to December 11th and abstain from November 20th.
We're not voting on the 11th, we're just reviewing, it's just the 20th. So
Just the
you're
20th.
you're abstaining from the 20th?
Abstaining from
Okay.
20th, yes, thank you.
Mrs. Downey?
Yes.
Mrs. Moran?
Abstain.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Committee reports, Mrs. Dorian, would you take administrative?
Sure. Administrative items, I'd like to present item A1,
I'll
which is
second.
the recognition.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? We're voting to recognize ourselves, basically. Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey? Mrs. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Darian's not here. We'll be going over committees, Mrs. Nori and I, but for now, Mr. Nutlin, you want to take it? Such, you're on that committee. B, Buildings and Grounds.
So B1, I hereby recommend the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following requests for use of facilities, school year 24-25, in accordance with policy 1330.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions or anything for Buildings and Grounds? I have one question. Are we, you had mentioned that we're putting out the bidding for next summer. Did we decide, are we putting the HVAC unit for the kindergarten wing in with the Airedales? Is it going to be one bid? No?
No. We can't do that because of the way
Okay.
it was all set up.
Oh, because originally it couldn't be that way?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be two separate,
It's be two separate.
and they're both going out now, or just
No, that's what we were going to talk about
in B and G?
in B.
Okay, so just the Airedales
Just
right
the
now and go
Airedales.
out.
We'll have those at the end of the month.
Okay. Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey? Mrs. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Norian.
Yes. I'd like to present C1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey?
Yes.
Mrs. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Finance, technology, Mr. Del Greco, you want to take that?
Sure. I'd like to bring D1 through D2.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions?
I have a question. The donation, is that something specific, or?
It's specifically for recycling. It is a passion project for Mr. Werner, and he would like to increase our recycling. We have one hurdle to overcome in terms of where to put an additional dumpster.
So
Awesome.
this was something he applied for, right? Is it a donation, a grant? Like, what is it? Like,
It's a grant which can be accepted. You actually can apply for it annually.
okay. And what do we have to do with it? What are we supposed to be?
It was written to increase recycling at Oradell Public School.
All right. Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco?
Yes.
Mrs. Downey?
Yes.
Mrs. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I have nothing to report.
Personnel, Mrs. Walker is not here. Mrs. Norian, you want to take that?
Sure. You have the personnel report in your
Packet.
notes, your
Folder.
packet for today, the folder. It's actually not the packet, it's the addendum to the packet. So all the information is there, and I'd like to present it for approval.
I'll second it.
F1.
One for approval. Any questions? Call the question? Oh, Mr. Del Greco? Oh, call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Moran.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. Mr. Nutland.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Public Relations, Mrs. Downey. Were you at the meeting for the new website? Okay, so where are we at with that?
As I shared during my report, we will launch it within the next month. We've been meeting, Mrs. Cataldo and I weekly with our representative from Apogee.
So will the PR committee see it before,
Sure.
before it's finalized? So we'll do that, okay. Open to the public for anything.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
we skipped
Sorry.
over policy.
Oh, hold on, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. Policy, Mr. Del Greco, sorry.
Sorry about that, no
Didn't
problem.
do that on purpose.
We did have a meeting on December 18th before the holidays. So we did talk about school activity funds, tutoring and conflict of interest, Oprah changes, which was mandatory, HIB training sign-off, gender identity and expression, and then distribution of materials by pupils and staff.
Right, so which ones are going to be on the next? I think Oprah, there'll be 2 on the next one, so will they be sent to the board before then, or were they already to the whole board?
No, they'll be sent in the next packet.
Okay, yeah, so some of them are just under discussion, but 2, I think, will go on for first reading next time. Sorry. Okay, open to the public, sorry about that. If you could just state your name for the record, and then you can
Andrew
write in the
Pratt.
book.
Okay.
What was your name?
Andrew Pratt.
Okay.
Just a couple quick questions. I have 2 daughters here. One of them is 10 years old, and she is telling me that not a lot of the watering stations work in the school.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Not a lot of the watering stations, like the refilling stations for your water bottles, are working at the school. She said one of them's brown. I think the one by the NPR room doesn't work. A lot of them are really tough to fill up your water bottle. I don't know if that's something that you guys have heard or if this is an exaggeration, but
I haven't heard it, so we will look into it.
okay. I know the one by the NPR room, like the water bottle, like it doesn't work. So a lot of the kids enter for basketball through there, and they can't refill the water bottles.
Okay.
That's one thing. Second, we have a lot of basketball practices. We rent out the gym, and I feel like in past years the door was always unlocked by the janitor, so the kids could come in and out during the normal basketball practice times, and it's been locked.
Which door are you speaking of specifically?
By the NPR room.
But, like, which one, going,
The main entrance into the hallway.
oh,
Yeah. The covered one by the basketball court.
the outside one?
Yeah.
And
Why
it's
the
now
kids are
locked?
like constantly waiting outside, and then we have to interrupt the people that are working the aftercare program. I don't know if it's something where like the janitors usually they used to unlock the doors around like 5:30. I don't know if you have policies or.
So we're not going to give you an answer right now. I
Yeah.
will tell you
No,
that
no.
security here has been under discussion.
Okay.
So it could be part of that. I don't want to speak too much, but we will discuss it with the superintendent and we will find out. There might be a reason for it. I will tell you this, though. I'm going to ask Mr. Iapelli now, can all the all the fountains be looked at tomorrow?
Yes,
And if you can email the board about it?
Yes.
Just to let us know. We will have that looked at tomorrow.
yes.
We
It could be an
appreciate you.
exaggeration. She's 10, so.
It could be, but you know
She
what?
makes it sound like it's
Check
Flint,
it out.
Michigan
Yeah,
here.
yeah, it could be the one they use. It could be, but let's just check them all, because why not?
That's okay. Those are the only 2 small things I have. Thank you.
You can complain about some other things. We're just so happy to have someone from the public here.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll ask another one. This is kind of a bigger topic. I don't know if it's.
And we may not be able to answer it.
No, that's fine, and you maybe had bigger discussions about this, but I know a lot of the softball has come up that may be improving the fields, and I don't know if you guys have, there's rumors that there's policies you guys can't put down chemicals to kill the weeds and stuff, but the field's kind of embarrassing. I don't know if there's a way to like work with, the different recreation committee and the, different softball and people that use the field to improve it, but.
So we have worked with softball before. We ran sprinklers, I believe, for it. If you want to talk about, there are definitely rules about chemicals we cannot put down, but do you want to speak to
We
that?
did fix our sprinklers right at the end of
Yeah.
the summer, so hopefully that's going to help. And if you've noticed that we reseeded on Center Street, we are going to continue reseeding, because part of that is we need some grass.
Yeah, we need
So-
grass, but the weeds become just, by the end of the summer, just all weeds, there's no grass. I don't know if that might be tough if you have a chemical restriction, but.
I mean, do we have the chemical restriction in the summer, Mr. Iapelli?
It's,
We actually don't have a Chemical restriction.
With what we can put on, we could do.
Well, you
Well,
have to
we just have to
notify,
notify.
and you have to stay off for 72 hours.
Yeah, so it's hard with school, but can
But
we look
it's-
into it?
Yeah, it's more for the summer, I think,
Yeah.
that it gets.
We'll look into it. I know Mr. Nutland's listening very carefully right
He's
now on this,
excited.
because he likes this topic.
Yeah.
This is his topic.
If
Well,
I'm,
just-
I'm allowed to speak, yeah, I,
You look at the middle school, it gets tons of play, but they have grass and not weeds.
You want to comment, Mr. Nutland?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Pratt. You know, the fields, you know, you go to a lot of other places and they have really some phenomenal places. And this has the potential to be really a great field. It also gets to showcase our school. And I think that's one of the things for me. I'm proud of our schools. I love this auditorium. So I would love to see us, you know, improve upon those facilities.
Yeah. I think part of it was the sprinklers not being on, so that's
That's a-
been filled,
needs
so,
water.
and we're seeding, so let's see what happens. Anything else?
That's all, thank you.
Thanks for coming. Anything else from our other member of the public? Any old or new business?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So when, like, over break, like that weekend, that first weekend, we still had basketball here and
Turn your mic on.
the sidewalks were like really icy. Is that like not something like we're responsible for if we're closed?
What day was this?
The 21st?
It was a Saturday, or,
Yeah, it was a Saturday. Like we still had, our kids still had basketball.
oh, and the school was
side-
closed for the break?
Yeah, the school was closed for the break, so I didn't know.
We still clear, so Mr. Iapelli and I will check with that. I mean, it's frankly a risk management
Well, that's
issue
what I
not
thought,
to
that's why-
have it done.
Yeah, I thought to bring it up. Okay.
Yeah, so can you find out if anyone was here and did it? Was it specific sidewalks, like all of them?
I don't know about all of them, but on that side of the building, that's center, right?
Center, okay. I meant to do this earlier in my report, but I forgot. I wanted to welcome Mrs. Moran to the board. Anything you want to tell us why you ran? I mean, you don't have to, don't be on the spot, but anything you want to tell us, or we're happy to have you.
I just want to say thank you, and I'm honored to be here and work with all of you. I look forward to it.
Yeah, we met last night and lovely, so we're excited to have you. Any other old or new business? Any reason to go into a closed session? Anybody? Okay.
No closed session?
Closed session.
All right.
So, if somebody else want to do the adjournment, I can
can do
still
it,
do
it's
it?
your
Okay. I move to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Second. I guess we'll just do all in favor? Aye. All right.
Hey.
So.
Want to keep it?
That's all yours.